The Gun Seller, a novel by Hugh Laurie. Part 1, Chapter 1. Quote, I saw a man this morning who did not wish to die. End quote. By P.S. Stewart. Imagine that you have to break someone's arm. Right or left, doesn't matter. The point is that you have to break it, because if you don't, well, that doesn't matter either. Let's just say bad things will happen if you don't. Now, my question goes like this. Do you break the arm quickly? Snap, whoosh, sorry, here, let me help you with that improvised splint. Or do you drag the whole business out for a good 8 minutes, every now and then increasing the pressure in the tiniest of increments, until the pain becomes pink and green and hot and cold and altogether howlingly unbearable? Well, exactly, of course. The right thing to do, the only thing to do, is to get it over with as quickly as possible. Break the arm, ply the brandy, be a good citizen. There can be no other answer. Unless. What if you were to hate the person on the other end of that arm? I mean, really, really hate them. This was the thing I had to consider. I say now, meaning then, meaning the moment I am describing. The moment fractionally, oh so bloody fractionally, before my wrist reached the back of my neck, and my left humerus broke in at least 2, very possibly more, floppily joined together pieces. The arm we've been discussing, you see, is mine. It's not an abstract philosopher's arm. The bone, the skin, the hairs, the small white scar on the point of the elbow, won from the corner of a storage heater at Gateshill Primary School. They all belong to me, and now is the moment when I must consider the possibility that the man standing behind me, gripping my wrist and driving it up my spine with an almost sexual degree of care, hates me. I mean, really, really hates me. He is taking forever. His name was Rayner, first name unknown, by me at any rate, and therefore, presumably, by you too. I suppose someone somewhere must have known his first name, must have baptized him with it, called him down to breakfast with it, taught him how to spell it, and someone else must have shouted across the bar with an offer of a drink, or murmured it during sex, or written it in a box on a life insurance application form. I know they must have all done all these things. Just hard to picture, that's all. Rayner, I estimated, was 10 years older than me, which was fine, nothing wrong with that. I have good, warm, non-arm-breaking relationships with plenty of people who are 10 years older than me. People who are 10 years older than me are, by and large, admirable. But Rayner was also 3 inches taller than me, 4 stones heavier, and at least 8, however you measure violence units, more violent. He was uglier than a car park, with a big hairless skull that dipped and bulged like a balloon full of spanners, and his flattened fighter's nose apparently drawn on his face by someone using their left hand, or perhaps their left foot, spread out on a mindering, lopsided delta under the rough slab of his forehead. And God Almighty, what a forehead! Bricks, knives, bottles, and reasoned arguments had, in their time, bounced harmlessly off this massive frontal plane, leaving only the feeblest indentations between its deep, widely spaced pores. They were, I think, the deepest and most widely spaced pores I have ever seen in human skin, so I found myself thinking to the council putting green in Dalbeattie at the end of the long, dry summer of '76. Moving now to the side elevation, we find that Rayner's ears had, long ago, been bitten off and spat back onto the side of his head, because the left one was definitely upside down, or inside out, or something that made you stare at it for a long time before thinking, oh, it's an ear. And on top of all this, in case you hadn't got the message, Rayner wore a black leather jacket over a black polo neck. But of course, you would have gotten the message. Rayner could have swathed himself in shimmering silk and put an orchid behind each ear, and nervous passerbyers would still have paid him money first, and wondered afterwards whether they owed him any. As it happened, I didn't owe him any money. Raina belonged to that select group of people to whom I didn't owe anything at all, and if things had been going a little better between us, I might have suggested that he and his fellows have a special tie struck to signify membership, a motif of crossed paths, perhaps. But, as I said, things weren't going well between us. A one-armed combat instructor called Cliff, yes, I know, he taught unarmed combat and he only had one arm. Very occasionally life is like that. Once told me that pain was a thing you did to yourself. Other people did things to you, they hit you or stabbed you or tried to break your arm, but pain was of your own making. Therefore, said Cliff, who had spent a fortnight in Japan and so felt entitled to unload dog shit of this sort on his eager charges, it was always within your power to stop your own pain. Cliff was killed in a pub brawl 3 months later by a 55-year-old widow, so I don't suppose I'll ever have the chance to set him straight. Pain is an event. It happens to you, and you deal with it in whatever way you can. The only thing in my favour was that, so far, I hadn't made any noise. Nothing to do with bravery, you understand. I simply hadn't got round to it. Up until this moment, Raina and I had been pinging off the walls and furniture in a sweatily male silence, with only the occasional grunt to show that we were both still concentrating. But now, with not much more than 5 seconds to go before I passed out or the bone finally gave way, now was the ideal moment to introduce a new element. A sound was all that I could think of. So I inhaled deeply through my nose, straightened up to get as close as I could to his face, held the breath for a moment, and then let out what Japanese martial artists refer to as kiai. You'd probably call it a very loud noise, and that wouldn't be so far off. A scream of such blinding, shocking, what the fuck was that intensity that I frightened myself quite badly. On Raina, the effect was pretty much as advertised, because he shifted involuntarily to one side, easing the grip on my arm for about 1/12 of a second. I threw my head back into his face as hard as I could, feeling the gristle in his nose adjust itself around the shape of my skull, and a silky wetness spreading across my scalp. Then brought my heel up towards his groin, scraping the inside of his thigh before connecting with an impressive bundle of genitalia. By the time the 1/12 of a second had elapsed, Raina was no longer breaking my arm, and I was aware suddenly of being drenched in sweat. I backed away from him, dancing on my toes like a very old Saint Bernard, and looked around for a weapon. The venue for this pro-aim contest of 1 15-minute round was a small, inelegantly furnished sitting room in Belgravia. The interior designer had done a perfectly horrible job, as all interior designers do, every single time without fail, no exceptions. But, at the moment, his or her liking for heavy, portable objects happened to coincide with mine. I selected an 18-inch Buddha from the mantelpiece, with my good arm, and found that the little fellow's ear afforded a satisfyingly snug grip for the one-handed player. Raina was kneeling now, vomiting on a Chinese carpet and improving its colour no end. I chose my spot, braced myself, and swung at him back-handed, plugging the corner of the Buddha's plinth into the soft space behind his left ear. There was a dull, flat noise of the kind that only human tissue under attack can make, and he rolled over onto his side. I didn't bother to see whether he was alive. Callous, perhaps, but there you go. I wiped some of the sweat from my face and walked through into the hall. I tried to listen, but if there was any sound from the house or from the street outside, I would never have heard it, because my heart was going like a road drill. Or perhaps there was a road drill outside. I was too busy sucking in great suitcase-size chunks of air to notice.